And it was just a very pleasant river. It's very clean looking too, because I've seen the Mississippi and the Ohio rivers, and they are not pretty. Right, this one was nice and blue, so that was a step up. It was like the nice, well-kempt sister of the Ohio River. Hello, I'm Laurence, and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos just happens to pertain to the places in each of the countries in question. Now, I've lived in the United States now for about 11 years, and in that time I've sort of made it another quest to try to reach as many places in the United States that I possibly can, and then sort of talk about them on this channel. And it's important to me to not just see the big names, like New York City, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, you get the picture, but to see everything in between. And so that brings us to places like Charleston, West Virginia. Growing up in England, I don't think I ever imagined I would visit the capital city of a state called West Virginia. It wasn't really on my radar. Again, growing up there, I heard about Orlando, Florida. In fact, I went there on a package deal when I was 8 years old. Not alone, I was with my parents. That would have been extraordinary. So in other words, generally speaking, that's how British people see America, I think, is you got New York, Florida, Texas as the South, and then California, and that's about it. So if I have any British viewers, which I know I do, 10% at the last count, then these videos are just as much for you, I think, as for my American viewers, who would nonetheless, I hope, be interested in my perspective on some of these places that you don't often see in other travel videos to the United States. And furthermore, I do want these videos, these top lists, to have quite a positive outlook, hence the name 5 Things I Love About Charleston, West Virginia. I happen to believe, I am an optimist, I happen to believe there's beauty you can find in everything. Now, to take the case of Charleston, West Virginia, I could focus on the thing that a taxi driver told me there about the opioid crisis, and I could concentrate on some of the crime level statistics that happen in West Virginia. They're out there, look for yourself for sure. This isn't a video, and this series of videos is not about what it's like to live in these towns or cities. It's just the experience that I had while visiting there. Now, we didn't spend more than a day, I should point that out, and by all accounts, talking to locals, a day is about all you need in Charleston to see the highlights of the place. I suppose in many ways it's important to note that Charleston as well is definitely not New York City. It's very typical, I think, mid-size, can we say mid-size city in the United States. In that respect, it and other cities like it here in the United States are quite different from those that you might find back in Britain. But without further ado, let's take a look at 5 things that I loved about that very city. So I suppose the best place to start would be the downtown area, which, after waking up after a flight cancellation, that's exactly where the wife and I started, and it's a very, very pleasant downtown area. It's not Times Square, don't expect that. It is, very small, very localized, very friendly, and I would highly recommend, if you're looking for a leisurely half an hour, to go and get a coffee from a nearby coffee shop and walk over to Davis Park and just sort of sit and relax. Take in the morning city air. I mean, again, it's not heavily polluted like London would be. And you get to look at this statue of Henry Gasaway Davis. What a name that is. He, in fact, had a failed presidential bid in 1904. Speaking of failures, it looks like he is, in fact, wearing away. But that's part of his charm, I thought. I did read that they were looking to give him a makeover. Maybe they've done that since I've last been there. But this is how I choose to remember Henry, as a washed-up politician made out of bronze. Of course, while we're on the subject of coffee, there's one place I have in mind, not only to get a cup of that very thing, but also a very hearty breakfast. So Swiftwater Cafe, it tends to happen that on mornings when I am travelling, I get very hungry because we tend not to have breakfast at the hotel. So we walk out in the hope that we might find somewhere. And thankfully, even in my hangry stupor, we found this place, Swiftwater Cafe, and they do some really nice sandwiches. I highly recommend checking those out. I think I had a bacon butty, although they didn't call it that, and it certainly wasn't British bacon. But it's very hard to find that in the United States. So if you are from Britain and you do happen to find yourself in Charleston for whatever reason, and you do go to Swiftwater Cafe, again, it'll be American bacon, slightly crispy, but on a nice bun, and good coffee. Really good. And for those of you that like to go angling, as in fishing, I don't, it's not really my cup of tea. It'd be a very weird tasting cup of tea, wouldn't it? Then they have a little fishing memorabilia all on the walls. I'm not sure if it's their family, their friends, or patrons, or whatever it might be, but they're just photos of people that went fishing, which I found interesting. Speaking of fishing and speaking of ponds, because it's in my channel name, that brings me on to our next entry in a roundabout way. So this is the main river that runs through Charleston, and I'm reliably informed by Wikipedia that it's pronounced Kanawha. I've given up on the pronunciation of that, but rest assured it is of native origin, and it is a tributary of the Ohio River, which is itself a tributary of the Mississippi River, and it comes all the way to West Virginia. And we just had a pleasant sort of walk along the river. By all accounts, you can take your boats out onto it if you own one, or maybe you can even rent them. I haven't even looked into that. It looked like it would be very pleasant to do so, because behind it you have all the sort of grandliness of the hillsides and the houses that are up there as well. And you get to look back on the city. It was just really nice. And at this point, you know, I've been to so many places that include famous rivers. I suppose the Mississippi, I've seen it in St. Louis, and the Ohio, and it just sort of speaks to that early time when settlements were happening in this country. They were often, the big cities were placed next to waterways like rivers, and so Charleston is no exception. Of course, it's the capital city of West Virginia. Makes perfect sense. It is placed on a river, which back in the day would have been perfect for trading and shipments and things like that, I suppose. We happened to go around Labor Day weekend as well, so the weather was still really nice, and so by the side of the river you had all of these sort of flowers, berries, things like that. Oh, look at that, that's a nice Instagram worthy shot. And it was just a very pleasant river. It was very clean looking too, because I've seen the Mississippi and the Ohio rivers and they are not pretty. Right, this one was nice and blue, so that was a step up. It was like the nice, well-kempt sister of the Ohio River. And so I spoke a moment ago, of course, about the kinds of views that you get from the Kanawha River, and that brings us on to our penultimate entry. Anybody that knows this channel and has seen these kinds of videos before will know that I've become quite a sort of an obsessive about Capitol buildings around the United States. You know, each state has one. It's kind of like a game of top trumps in a way, just for adults and way more boring. But the architecture of a lot of the Capitol buildings in the United States is very, very similar. Think the Capitol building, the nation's Capitol building in DC. They're obviously quite different in terms of their look and aesthetic from the kind of parliamentary buildings you would find in Britain, such as the Houses of Parliament with Big Ben and all of that. And so I suppose when I think of these buildings, I think more of Christopher Wren's design of St. Paul's Cathedral, which you can see across the River Thames. Obviously, this was not the River Thames, and I wasn't looking at St. Paul's Cathedral, but I was looking at the West Virginia Capitol building, which I have to say, after seeing numerous Capitol buildings now in Springfield, Illinois, in Indianapolis, Indiana, in Salt Lake, you get the picture. This is, I think, the most opulent looking one that I've seen. Now, the reason I say that is that the dome is in fact painted gold. It's not the only one in the United States that can say that, but it's certainly the first one that I've encountered firsthand that can say that. And so, again, very Instagram worthy. I'm really just saying that so you follow me on Instagram. You get the picture, okay? And, you know, like all good Capitol buildings, you can see it more or less throughout the entire city, so it is a focal point. But something that I found very much to my happiness is not only can you go inside, but I found it far more enchanting than a lot of the other Capitol buildings I've been into. The one in Boise, for example, was nice. You know, I got to walk around it and produce the echo of my lovely accent. But there wasn't really much going on there. In this place, it felt like there were multiple different rooms that you could walk into. Whether or not you were allowed, I don't know. I never did ask. I don't know. It was very cool. And we went down to the basement at one point, and there was this old banjo in there from the 19th century. It was behind some glass, so I never got to play it. But the whole building was actually genuinely quite magnificent. And so if you do find yourself in Charleston, I would highly recommend going there. It's free, you know, you don't have to pay anything. Yeah, spend, you know, half an hour in there, you know, go check out some of the more echoey rooms. Get lost, we did. We got lost down some corridors, but I enjoy getting lost. That's part of the fun. That's part of my channel name. It's the other part of my channel name, Lost in the. So, you know, it is something we like to do, and this affords you that opportunity, I think. There's this one corridor that I remember where you're walking down it, and there's all these huge portraits of what I believe were kind of state senators. Maybe they were even mayors of the city, and it just overall gave you a sense, I think, for kind of the political makeup, but also the political history of the city. But in my ill-considered opinion, nothing did more to conjure up a historical narrative of the city, and indeed the wider state, more than our final entry. I'm genuinely not joking when I say this. You would be hard-pressed to find a free museum better than this one in the entire United States. Essentially, as a museum, it gives you a very expansive history. And when I say expansive, I mean expansive. It even looks at the paleontology of West Virginia, taking us back millions of years to see what the geology of present-day West Virginia would have been like. And then, of course, it looks at early settlers, native settlements and things like that, and really gives you a picture of just what Appalachia was like in its early human history. And I love things like that because it contextualizes the present, right? It brings us up to where we are today. And it looked at kind of how Scottish and Scots-Irish immigrants came to West Virginia as part of that migration over, who ultimately would go on to influence bluegrass music, which is really big in West Virginia and in the Appalachian Mountains. Not only did they do that, but they influenced a local pronunciation, which actually spanned out to other parts of the South and even Midwest, of the word wash or Washington as warsh or Washington. But this museum covered something in great detail that I'm deeply interested in, and that's the coal mining industry. Anyone who's unfamiliar with West Virginia's story, coal mining was kind of the bread and butter of people's lives. Much like the fishing industry in my hometown of Grimsby back home, the industry saw a big decline, which has seen, an increase in unemployment levels in West Virginia. It was very interesting to then get the backstory from an academic point of view and to really tie the dots together in terms of the years. Great museum. If you find yourself in Charleston for whatever reason, you've just got an hour or two to spare, that's the place I would go. And so that's my list. Have you been to Charleston, West Virginia? Do you live in Charleston, West Virginia? Do you have some more recommendations that you could put in the comments below? If you do, put them in the comments below. That only makes sense. Until next time, go and get yourself a juicy bacon butty, or the vegetarian equivalent. Bye. Where on earth? Oh, hello. Thank you for watching this latest episode of Lost in the Pond, and if you like what you see on this channel, why not consider becoming a patron of Lost in the Pond like these fine folks that you see here to the right. One of the perks of doing so is you get to join my Patreon-only live stream every Tuesday night, no matter how big or small your pledge. So if you want to support this channel and help make it grow larger than the sun, then go to patreon.com/lostinthepond. Now, if you like this video, there are two more things that you should do at this very moment. Firstly, share it with the entire world, and secondly, check out this related video. I highly recommend it, but please binge responsibly. And finally, if you've not had the chance to do so, you can subscribe to Lost in the Pond in a very satisfying way by punching my stupid little face. Until the next video, goodbye.